All right, so let's get into a topic that's, well, it's a little unsettling, to be honest, but it's also one of the most important things we can possibly understand right now. We're going to talk about what happens when it feels like a huge chunk of society just loses its grip on reality, and more importantly, how you can keep your own mind clear when it's all going down.
I mean, just let that sink in for a second. It sounds like something straight out of a horror movie, right? But here's the thing. This isn't fiction. It's a very real psychological phenomenon that has happened over and over again throughout history. Psychologists have a name for it, mass psychosis. And that's exactly what we're going to break down.
Okay, so first up, let's get a real handle on what this collective spell actually is, because it goes way deeper and gets a lot stranger than just, a bad idea going viral on the internet.
And this is the really key thing to get. We're not talking about a simple disagreement over facts. This is a state where logic gets completely short-circuited. I mean, people can believe two totally contradictory things at the same time and not even flinch. Reason just gets tossed out the window, and in its place you get these powerful emotional slogans that just get repeated over and over and over.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. This has got to be a new problem, right? A bug in our modern internet-fueled world, but it's not. Not even close. This is an ancient feature of the human mind. Think about ancient Rome, with bread and circuses used to distract everyone while the whole empire was crumbling. Or the Middle Ages with those terrifying waves of hysteria like the witch hunts, where neighbor turned on neighbor out of pure manufactured terror. The tools we have today are definitely faster and a whole lot louder, but the underlying psychology, it's exactly the same.
So how on earth does this happen? I mean, why do smart, rational people get swept up into these completely irrational crowds? Well, to understand that, we've got to look under the hood at the engine that really drives this whole thing. So check this out. Over a century ago, a psychologist named Gustave Le Bon basically figured this out. He was one of the first people to realize that the second we join a crowd, it's like a switch flips in our heads. See, on the left, you've got the individual mind. That's you, thinking things through, weighing evidence, feeling responsible. But when we merge into the crowd mind on the right, poof, all of that just dissolves. Emotion completely takes over, and we become impulsive, angry, and weirdly, very obedient.
But for that crowd switch to really get flipped, you need one key ingredient: fear. Fear is the fuel for this whole machine. It hijacks our survival instincts. It narrows our focus so intensely that it actually shuts down the part of our brain that's good at complex, rational thought. And a brain that's scared doesn't want nuance. It wants a simple story. It wants a hero to save them and a villain to blame, and it wants it right now.
Okay, but this brings up a huge question, right? Because even when we're scared, a lot of us still have that little voice in the back of our head that says, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right. So why do we so often just shut that voice down? The answer is hardwired into us. For our ancient ancestors, getting kicked out of the tribe was a death sentence. Belonging meant survival. And believe it or not, that ancient programming is still running the show in our brains today.
And if you want proof of just how powerful this is, look at this number. It comes from a famous experiment by Solomon Asch. He asked people to do a super simple task. Just match the length of a line. The answer was completely obvious. But then he put a bunch of actors in the room who all confidently gave the wrong answer. And what happened? A staggering 75%, that's 3 out of 4 people, caved and went along with the group, literally denying the evidence of their own eyes.
Now, this whole process of a society falling into a delusion, you might think it's just random chaos, but it's not. It actually follows a surprisingly predictable pattern. And once you see these stages, you start seeing them pop up everywhere. So here's how it usually goes down. It starts with stage 1, disorientation. Things feel unstable, the old rules don't seem to apply, and people are just anxious and desperate for answers. Then comes stage 2, simplification. A really simple, emotionally charged story emerges that has a clear hero and a clear villain. Next is conformity. People start adopting the story, not always because they believe it, but just to feel safe. And this is where it gets really dangerous. Silence is mistaken for agreement. That leads right into stage 4, aggression. Now the crowd starts to police itself, and anyone who dares to question the story becomes a threat. And then finally, if you're lucky, you get to the awakening, when the story starts to crack because reality itself just pushes through the illusion. Okay, so seeing that pattern is a huge first step. But the real question is, what do you actually do about it? How do you protect your own mind when you feel like you're caught in the middle of all this? Let's talk about building a kind of psychological immunity. But I've got to be honest with you. Waking up from this, seeing things clearly, it's not always some big happy aha moment. A lot of the time, it can feel like grief. It can be incredibly lonely when you realize that ideas or even entire systems you trusted, we're built on really shaky ground. It takes a ton of courage to face that.
So how do we build up this immunity? Well, here are 5 key things you can practice. First, awareness. Just constantly ask yourself, is this really strong opinion I have really mine, or did I just sort of absorb it from the crowd? Second, emotional control. You know that jolt of outrage you feel when you see a headline? Just pause. Take a breath. Create a little bit of space between the trigger and your response. Third, find a deeper meaning. Have a personal why that's strong enough to anchor you when all the social currents get crazy. Fourth, find real allies. And I don't mean an echo chamber, I mean find people who value honesty more than they value comfort. And finally, number 5, control your information diet. Actively seek out clarity and nuance, not just another dose of outrage.
You know, when you boil it all down, it really comes to this. The final escape isn't about fighting the crowd. It's about outgrowing your need for the crowd's approval. It's about building your own internal compass so that no matter which way the winds are blowing, you always know your own true north.
And this leaves us with one last really powerful thought. In a world that seems to be going completely mad, maybe the most revolutionary act isn't fighting the system. Maybe it's just quietly and deliberately freeing your own mind from the noise. Because here's the thing, when enough individual minds break free, the big illusions that hold everything together, they just can't stand. And that right there is where every real revolution begins.